Coming up on Network Africa, hundreds take to the streets in deadly protests against regional force in Democratic Republic of Congo. More than 10 people killed in clashes in contested Somaliland town. Plus, Russian foreign minister arrives in Mali for talks. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Anne Mwawadu. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where hundreds of demonstrators have taken to the streets for a second day in Goma, bringing the city to a standstill. At least 2 people died yesterday following violent clashes between protesters and Congolese security forces. The demonstrators accuse the United Nations and the East African Regional Force of failing to support the Congolese military operations against the M23 rebel group. But on Monday this week, security forces fired tear gas to disperse crowds who pelted stones and threw petrol bombs at the UN headquarters in Goma. Reports say a church in one of the neighborhoods was demolished during the clash. Meanwhile, East African regional leaders renewed their call for an immediate ceasefire by all sides in the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo that pits the country's military against the rebel group it had accused Rwanda of supporting. At a summit in Burundi's capital, the leaders of the regional East African Community bloc called for an immediate ceasefire by all parties. The M23 rebel group had seized large areas of eastern Congo's North Kivu province in a rapid onslaught since October the 20th that has threatened the provincial capital, Goma.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, deplores the expulsion of his representative from Mali. We are deeply disturbed by and we deeply regret the Malian authorities' decision to declare the top UN human rights representative in the country as persona non grata. The High Commissioner is very troubled by the intimidation and harassment our representative, Guillaume Ngefa, has faced in social media in recent months. We call on the interim authorities in Mali to rescind this regrettable decision without delay. The United Nations has long maintained that the doctrine of persona non grata does not apply to personnel of the UN. It is contrary to the obligations of member states under the UN Charter, including those concerning the privileges and immunities of the UN and its staff. Human rights are integral to peacekeeping. We urge the authorities to create a respectful, safe, and enabling environment for human rights work in Mali, which is more crucial than ever in the current context. We urge the Malian authorities to ensure better respect for and protection of human rights defenders. No one should face reprisals for speaking out on human rights issues.
Let's now bring in a security expert, David Otto, to tell us more about this. Hello, David. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for having me.
All right. So why did the Eastern regional leaders think it was necessary to set up a peacekeeping force?
Of course, I mean, this is in the backdrop of the conflicts, as you know, that has been happening in the eastern part, especially around the Kivu area, where predominantly so many of these jihadist groups, these terrorist groups, armed groups, M23 and the rest, they've been creating a lot of turmoil in that region, actually taking a lot of territory. And I think it was necessary at the time, for the East African community to come in, especially to create a buffer zone and ensure that these clashes between the Congolese defense forces and these rebel groups is averted. But of course, also because there were some concerns that the Rwandan forces, were also getting a little bit jittery, especially with the accusation that the Congolese government made that, Rwanda was supporting the M23 rebels. So I think the the East African community came in as, some kind of a peacekeeping mission that, of course, without the teeth, as they call it, because it was not meant to carry out any offensives. It was meant to be strictly a defensive mission. And this is why it's creating some problems within the local population.
All right, but people allege that M23 complications, this at least looks like a shot at peace, if you ask anyone. But why are the people against it?
I think the reason why the people are against it, especially locally, is that they see this as another UN peacekeeping mission. And, as you know, the UN has not been very successful in maintaining peace and stability within that region. Just recently, there was one of the UN helicopters that was shot down. Well, not shot down, but actually hit by an unknown hand-to-surface missile. But again, the UN has been seen as not providing any kind of solution because of the rules of engagement of the UN security forces in that region, the blue helmets, they call them. So I think what the local population is saying is if the same EAC forces are doing the same thing that the UN is doing, then of course they don't see any results coming out of that. That's one of the main reasons why they are protesting, because they think this is just business as usual.
But does this have a historical basis in any way, in the sense that the DRC is hosting many of the Hutus who perpetrated an act in 1994, that's a genocide, and Kagame also believes that Rwanda cannot be at peace while these people are free? If so, then how do the parties move forward from here?
And I think this is part of the double accusation, because, of course, the Rwandan government saying clearly that the DRC government is supporting some of the rebels that, were causing problems in Rwanda. On the other hand, the Rwandan government is saying that the Tutsi-led M23 is supported by Rwanda. So there's this accusation and counter-accusation between the government of Rwanda and the government of the DRC. But mainly, I think even within the United Nations and countries like US and the UK, they've accused Rwanda of being the main supporter of these rebel groups. So I think that is the main thing. But again, when it comes to the peace negotiations, we have seen so many other summits being held. Of course, recently in Bujumbura, we saw the Nairobi Accord, which was led by the then former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. We also had the Angolan president involved in the Luanda process. But again, I think the key thing here is for the sincerity of the Congolese leadership and that of Rwanda to get into some kind of a negotiation and to avert, the current situation where more swaths of land and more people have been displaced as a result of the crisis.
All right, but let's just call this the irony of life. I mean, of all the countries in East Africa, Rwanda is the smallest, but it seems to have the most effective army. But when it comes to Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the largest, it's obviously with an ineffective army. Then there is Uganda and, of course, Burundi, others who invaded DRC in events leading to the death of Laurent Kabila. Do you foresee a situation where what is going on now might repeat itself again in future?
I think when it comes to military force, it's not about the size. It's all about, how effective your security forces are in terms of training. The smaller the country, in effect, the much better it is to manage. The larger the country, the more you have vulnerabilities and threats. So I think in the defense of countries like DRC, which is quite larger than a smaller counterpart like Rwanda, I think it's much more difficult, for them to control their borders, for them to maintain stability in areas where governance is limited. But I think again, in terms of approach and in terms of solution, this has to be an EAC-led approach, I think, and this is what has been put forward, recently, and that's why the Congolese president Felix Tshisekedi made it very clear that he was not going to attend the conference in Qatar because he believes, as many do, that this should be an East African-led initiative. Congo is one of those countries, as the Pope said, people should keep away from. A lot of countries, especially neighboring countries, have benefited from the rich mineral resources unofficially, and I think that is the main issue. It's almost like a resource curse, for the Congolese government. But hopefully, again, my approach would be, for the regional states, but especially the leadership and the people of DRC and the people of Rwanda to resolve this crisis.
All right. Thank you very much, security expert David Otto. Thank you for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you.
So let's still talk the African politics, which we've been discussing with Mr. David Otto. The East African regional leaders will remember renewed a call for an immediate ceasefire by all sides in the conflict in eastern DRC. A summit in Burundi's capital by leaders of the regional East African countries also called for an immediate ceasefire. But let's take a look at the development on the story.
The heads of state directed also as follows. 1, there must be immediate ceasefire by all political parties. 2, the withdrawal, including all foreign armed groups, and directed the Chief of Defense Forces of all the partner states of the East African community to meet urgently within the next 1 week and set new timelines for the withdrawal and recommend appropriate deployment matrix in different parts of Eastern DRC. And they also discussed that this process must be accompanied by dialogue. So it is first cessation, ceasefire, and then followed by withdrawal, and then dialogue. And any violations of this must be reported immediately to the chairperson of the summit for immediate consultations with members of the summit.
The Somali government armed militia has killed more than 10 people in clashes with forces from the self-declared Republic of Somaliland in a disputed town in the northern region. The town, Lassanod, is claimed by both Somaliland and the semi-autonomous Puntland region, which is loyal to Mogadishu. Hours before the clashes, traditional leaders in Seoul territory, where Lassanod is located, issued a statement pledging to support the unity and integrity of the Federal Republic of Somalia and asking Somaliland authorities to withdraw their forces from that area. Somaliland's Interior Minister Mohamed Kane Ahmed accused militias allied with traditional leaders of attacking military camps. According to a governor in northern Burkina Faso, the toll of those killed in an attack which was carried out over the weekend has now risen to at least 25, including 22 civilians and 3 police officers. Governor and Lieutenant Colonel Rodolphe Sorgo confirmed this in, quote, "The municipality of Bani in the province of Seno North was the target of a violent attack perpetrated by armed terrorist groups." He also adds that in a press release, the actions to secure the locality were underway and invited the population to more collaboration to overcome what he calls the terrorist hydra. Burkina Faso has been rocked since 2015 by attacks by groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and their clashes with the armed forces. The violence has left tens of thousands of people and some 2 million displaced. Well, let's talk about a new UN report which has suggested the most common factor driving people to join extremist groups in sub-Saharan Africa is not religion, but the need for work. That report by the UN Development Programme surveyed thousands of people in 8 African countries, including Mali, Nigeria, and Somalia. Only 17% of respondents said that religion was the reason for joining radical groups, whereas 40% said poverty was their main motivation. According to the UN, education is important, with 1 extra year of education significantly reducing a person's likelihood of joining an extremist group. Back in 2021, nearly half of deaths attributed to terrorist groups took place in sub-Saharan Africa. And to Mali now, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has arrived for talks with the military leadership of that country. Mr. Lavrov, who was in Iraq on Monday, was welcomed on arrival by his counterpart, Abdoulaye Diop. The Russian minister is expected to hold talks with the country's interim president, Assimi Goïta, and the foreign affairs minister. The Russian news agency TASS said the two sides will discuss issues of cooperation, including military ties and the shipment of Russian grain, fertilizer and oil products to Mali. The talks will also touch on issues about the war in Ukraine and on tackling terrorism in the Sahel region. This is Mr. Lavrov's second trip to Africa in 2 weeks. That's after touring South Africa, Angola, Eswatini and Eritrea back in January. Welcome back. We're in South Africa now, where the frequent power cuts are affecting businesses adversely, especially the food and beverage industry. The wine industry is also among the hardest hit, with many producers counting huge losses from the ongoing power shedding. South Africa is the 8th largest wine producer in the world, generating around $3 billion in revenue every year. But farmers and other producers in the wine industry have expressed their worry over cuts since it is the harvest season for most of the grapes in the country. Their representatives have now agreed with the power provider to supply them with power in the morning hours and immediately after lunch, as these are the hours when they need the power the most. South Africa is looking to add additional electricity capacity through emergency procurement of renewable energy sources like wind and solar, but that is unlikely to happen in the short term. And back here in Nigeria, a symposium organized by the Center for Values and Leadership has been held in Lagos, the nation's commercial center. The view of participants at this event is that Nigerians must begin to engage contenders to all political offices across the land to ensure that only those with the interests of the country at heart win the spot to govern. Our correspondent Timothy Crown reports.
Have decided to go to the way.
It's only a few days to the presidential election, which signals the commencement of the 2023 general elections, and some men of thought consider the time ripe to drive conversation around security, governance, and national development. This conference is the 20th in the series of the annual lecture by the Center for Value and Leadership.
General Alexander Ogomudia.
The brain behind this convergence, Professor Pat Utomi, a leading professor of political economy, underscores the rationale behind the talking point of security.
It tells of how this central issue in our life today, the issue of security, has come to be viewed. It is not possible to develop an economy if there isn't peace, if there isn't security.
Leaders in Nigeria's security environment are joined by a retired Army Colonel of the United States of America, Colonel Albert Short, who takes the keynote address.
The leader sets the tone, sets the objectives, and hopefully individuals at lower levels can, within that vision, can accomplish the goals. But leadership is the key in any solution.
Professor Sabo Sagagi laments how Nigeria is slacking in competitiveness in most of its agricultural value chain, a factor he blames for the country's poor performance in food security.
We have government that cannot feed its people. People are hungry. It's everywhere. In the north where I come from, for somebody to eat once a day, congratulate him.
The panel session focuses on seeking solutions to the insecurity challenge battling the country.
I dare say that what is happening in Nigeria is not accidental, it's not incidental, it's not circumstantial. It's not as if the abyss was, set ablaze and the gate was let loose and aliens came out from abyss and imploded Nigeria, and then we're having banditry and insurgency all at the same time happening. Something brought us to this point.
We can change all this by good governance. And good governance means good leadership, commitment of the leaders to the people who elected them into power, good criminal justice system that will be fair and just to all at all time.
This conference is Professor Tommy's way of marking his birthday, something he has done for upward of 20 years, and says that the conversation should not end in this room, but continued to the Nigeria of everyone's desire emerges. Timothy Crown, Adiribigbe, Channels Television News.
To election matters now, the run-up to a vote is usually a chance for small businesses like print houses to cash in on election paraphernalia, ranging from its hats and flip-flops to tissue boxes and even cooking oil labels. But business has been slower than usual ahead of the February 25th voting, as candidates have hinged their campaigns on social media. Get your virtual reality glasses ready as we take you to meet a Nigerian artist who is using artificial intelligence to reimagine life for African elderly people. He does this by showcasing nearly real-life pictures and videos of them walking down the fashion ramp and on the beach. Take a look.
White-haired men and women strut down the catwalk in the latest fashion, but it is not real life. These hyper-realistic images have been created using artificial intelligence by Nigerian artists.
That was the same day that a prophecy was meant to come to pass, the prophecy that nobody took serious.
Malika Febua, who is also a filmmaker, said because many elderly people were marginalized in society, especially in the fashion world, he began to imagine how they would look if they were models.
The Elder series came from me trying to showcase the elderly people in a different way that you don't normally see them. You know, because I feel they're marginalized. I feel like people don't talk about them, you know, in the community or anything. So I wanted to see them in a different space. And what inspired that was my personal relationship with my mom as well. So I wanted to see, you know, always, you know, imagine the elderly people in a place that is not either in a sad space or in a suppressed state.
Afebua started posting some of his work on social media, and it went viral.
Good to go, good to go.
He came up with Elders series, a catalogue of pictures and videos showing white-haired women and bearded men strutting the runway for a virtual fashion show in Afrocentric attire, including ornamental neck and arm bands.
So I never thought it was going to go this viral. I just thought my friends would like it, my friends would like it, I normally do, but I never thought it would go this far. However, when I was making it, I kind of knew there was something there. Because when I was creating it, I was enjoying the images. I was like, wow, this is dope. I'm loving what I'm seeing.
Afebua was not always an artist. He studied business in university, but stepped into the world of filming after a friend bought him a camera in 2011.
The history speaks a lot for us that we need to learn from to know where we're going to. So why don't we tap into that? You know, so that love for that, to find out more about them is always me trying to tap into that space. So for me trying to tap into that space already, I like to explore in terms of what are they missing out on, what's going on in society, and how can they be inclusive.
He said the idea to explore a different world for old people came when his elderly mother fell ill. Using an artificial intelligence app, he started creating content showing a brighter side of old age.
Well, something different and exciting. Well, finally on the program, after hours spent in anguish waiting for good news, the Ghana Football Association has confirmed that national player Christian Atsu has been found alive. He'd been trapped in the rubble of an earthquake that killed more than 4,800 people in Turkey and neighboring Syria. The former Newcastle midfielder joined Turkish Super League side Hatayspor, that was last September. The club is based in southern province of Hatay, near the epicenter of Monday's massive quake. No further details on Atsu's condition have been given. The Ghana Football Association continues with authorities and NGOs to know the whereabouts of Ghanaian football players in Turkey. Well, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of all those affected in that quake. And this is where we draw the curtains on Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu.